So how many folks in the room have been to a Tacofino, one place or another? Great. All right. So captive audience. If you've been to any of our restaurants or any of the trucks, one of the things that we're trying to do with Tacofino is really tailor our restaurants to what the communities kind of need and want. And that's as simple as takeout versus sit down, lunch versus dinner, that kind of stuff. But also what's appropriate for a neighborhood, rather than just jamming something in. Each one has a unique atmosphere, a completely different menu. And so it makes sense for us, the type of business that we're trying to build, that our people are just as unique and diverse. So we're a young organization. We have about 300 staff, and we're learning. Being an inclusive hirer, I don't want this to come across as some kind of how-to, but just think of this more as a step-by-step for how where we're at in terms of this process. So how does this start? How does the process start? One of the things that we like to be aware of is the idea that for folks with barriers to employment, it's possible that they've applied for literally hundreds of jobs and received no responses. We sort of take that as a given. And so it's really important to remember that kind of rejection can stop people from even trying to apply for jobs. So it starts with this page. This is an example of our hiring page, and if you go there, I think one of the things that we've seen work well is placing a statement on all the job descriptions to let people know that you're truly inclusive and highlighting your culture. In our case, a culture of respect, safety, teamwork, so that frankly everybody that applies understands those values are important. Secondly, and Nicholas just touched on the BC Win partnership, the importance of your relationships in the community can't really be understated. You just can't do this on your own. Many of these organizations, and Nicholas just went through this, so I won't spend a ton of time on it, but have job developers that can essentially connect you in and provide a little bit of a guide to job seekers who face barriers. We've recommended and done well with having job seekers come into our workplaces and really understand what the actual job entails. That makes it a lot better, and we made mistakes early on not doing that. But what we've seen is that the types of clients that they refer to us tend to be really tailored to the demands of the job, and they are demanding. The one relationship that I'll highlight on this slide is with VCC. This has been a long-standing and really successful relationship for us. We've partnered with one of their programs there called the Food Service Program for Adults with Disabilities, which supports students with cognitive diversity. So in addition to their typical classroom learning, they're actually spending 3 weeks in a sort of practicum working in one of the Tacofino kitchens. And through this relationship, we've made 5 successful hires, folks that are still with us today. So for an organization at our size, we think that's a great success. So the next step in the process, when you get into interviewing and onboarding, sort of 3 things to talk about. We have training guides available for interviews. We want those hiring folks to understand some of the common biases, that they may not be aware of. So we teach, as Nicholas mentioned as well, how to build better interview questions. We talk about what not to ask, which is important as well. It can throw people off. And then we also just focus on these common biases. Secondly, job previews. So having candidates actually come in themselves and see what's going on. What does it look like in the day-to-day? And this gives the managers an opportunity to also test a little bit for the specific skills that are going to be needed for the role. And then lastly, obviously, workplace orientation is critical when you make the hire. And then on the sort of ongoing basis, internally at Tacofino, we do these employee surveys. And of course, these go out to everybody. But asking these types of questions, these three specifically, as it pertain to whether or not our intentions are creating the kind of results we want about our organization. So, the scores on these tests and on these questions become KPIs for our HR manager. We have a great leadership team, and we need to really work with them to actively identify that these barriers that exist, that we're working to remove any of these barriers. And I think the point here is, if you have the intention as a business leader to create this kind of organization, you can't just then expect that the leadership is going to get it, implement it on a daily basis. There needs to be this kind of real feedback loop, and that's kind of a top-down driven process, forcing the conversation, making sure that what you're intending to happen is happening, that dialogue. Lastly here, I mentioned that diversity is really part of our fundamental business model. There's sort of three things that we think we really get back as part of that. Number one, it's a great way to become part of the community. Hiring diverse individuals has had a great impact for us back. We have great relationships with our clients. I don't know if it's because I'm an owner, but I get nothing but positive feedback from folks in the neighborhoods that we work in. Second is with the individuals themselves. Before we went through this program, I didn't really have an understanding for how important permanent employment is for some individuals. When you invest the time, you get it back tenfold. We have very low churn with the folks that we've hired that have barriers to entry. Lastly, I think, and this is about organizational health, if you have leaders in the organization that have to adapt their leadership style, and they become more mentors and teachers than they are just managers. And these are folks in our organization that have created cohesive, high-performing teams. And at the end of the day, I think, isn't that really our job as business leaders, to create those leaders? So yeah, that's all I've got. Thank you very much for having me.